Hello, welcome to Radar Radio. And this week we have our friend Ronnie Young, who is our first sound engineer on the show. Hi, Ronnie.
Hello, everybody.
And also, as usual, there's myself, Ash,
Hey, how you doing?
and Catherine.
Hello.
So, Ronnie, I think the best thing to do to catch everyone's imagination at the start, because, when you hear sound engineer, you switch off a little bit, is drop all your names, who you work with.
That's very offensive, Joe. Thanks. All right. So I've somehow managed to become the instrumental prog guy or the gent guy. So I'm working for Plini, Animals as Leaders, Periphery, Car Bomb. Who else? I've worked for Tesseract, and then on the other side of the noisy world, I'm working for The Devil Wears Prada in Europe and Straight from the Path in Europe. And whoever wants to, spend a lot of money, pay me, and I will work for your band too.
Amazing. So the most important question, I guess, is how did you get into that, and what made you want to be a sound engineer? Because you're also a musician, aren't you?
Yeah. So, well, actually, I was a sound engineer first. So I did this. I'm sure everybody out there, especially the ones that are in bands, you've done the rock school thing when you were in school. When I did mine, I was for 14. We did the recording part where you record a single, of your little 3-chord song that you've written that you think is the best song of all time. And the second I stepped into the studio, I was like, "Oh yeah, no, this is pretty cool." So the man that was working in the studio, John Clavering, he took me under his wing because he saw how interested I was. And so at 14, I got a studio job. And it wasn't until I was about 18, 19 that I did anything where I was in the band that was of any note with my old band. Did some light touring and stuff. And then actually sort of stopped doing music altogether. Went into teaching. I mean, don't ever do that. Teaching it was fun, but was just mixed in with a lot of other things in that period of time of my life, and I wanted to get away. And so the lovely boys in Nexilver, if you all remember Nexilver, offered to take me on tour so that I could, try out the live sound thing, since I had a lot of experience in the studio, the trust it is, and it turns out it's the most fun of all time. And very, very quickly snowballed. So that was in 2014, end of 2014. I went on that tour with Nexilver, and then I did a few little tours leading up to TechFest 2015, and then that's where I met Plini, and it was all downhill from there. And now I'm in the prog world. It's funny, like, before I met Plini and listened to Plini, I didn't really even know that instrumental prog was even a thing that was popular. And I mean, I love it. Obviously, I love it. I've never worked for a band that I didn't like, but when I started, touring with Nexilver, and I mixed, No Consequence and Exist Immortal and stuff. I figured I was going to end up working for a lot of, metalcore bands and like share the genty side of things, especially with No Con. But I did not imagine I was going to be mixing like Animals as Leaders in, sold out 2,000 cap venues and stuff. It's kind of weird. So weird. Didn't see it going that way, but it did. And I'm pretty happy about it.
I remember you saving my bacon once when we hadn't really met properly, and you were sound engineering on the Faceless show in Guildford, which was the worst show I've ever put on. And you were so calm and just got your stuff done as quickly as possible because you knew I was under massive time constraints because they were being a little difficult, I think it's fair to say. So thank you for that.
More than fair to say. That was an interesting one. I did 3 shows on that tour, I think.
I think we had the first one of the tour, didn't we? And
You did, yes.
Everything went wrong from the start.
Oh my lord, yeah, it was a car crash. I mean, it still happened, so that's good. Just happened.
Yeah, in the end, after, just for a bit of context, so they got in early. They had some problems. They had to build their rack on the day. They didn't want the support bands to load in until much later, so we didn't get anyone in. But then they had problems, so they said, "Oh, sound check the supports," but we couldn't because they weren't there. And then it turned out after all of this, and we cut some of the supports and everything because of the time, because I was under pressure from the tour manager, and they only did 30 minutes in the end.
Yeah, that rack. That rack, oh my word! You know that thing crashed every day, every single day, every show on that tour until they got to mainland Europe. But every UK show, bar the one that got cancelled, yeah, that rack crashed at the same point as well, same point in the set every night.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't just us.
Yeah, there must have been something with the.
So as far as I know, they were, I can't remember what it's called, but they were using this software that just hasn't been updated, I don't think, since about 2009. But he swears by it. You know who I mean. He swears by it because it's all he really knows. So even on like day 2 or 3, I was like, hey, if you send us the stems, I'll just build it up. I'll build you a Logic project or Cubase or whatever other like DAW you have on your Mac. I'll help you set it up. And he was like, yeah, cool. And then he disappeared, and I didn't see him again. So I don't know. I guess he had other things to be doing.
I was going to say, who's your favorite band to mix? Not necessarily whose music you enjoy the most, but who, I guess, do you find the most challenging or get the biggest reward from in terms of mixing with?
It was probably Periphery, and it's like I think it's probably just because the shows are bigger, but also that there's a lot going on in there. Like it's a challenge. I do like a challenge, and there's 3 guitar tracks, which is problematic on its own. But then you put in Spencer, who's incredibly dynamic, sings like barely a whisper 1 second, and then he's screaming his head off. Yeah, but they're so consistently tight that it's really a rewarding experience. But it does vary because it's, with the likes of Plini, we're still doing some big shows, but he is quite how can I say this? I always explain it as like I don't really work for huge bands, but I do work for very prestigious bands. So the vibe sometimes with Plini and Animals, and you might be doing 500, 600 people, which of course in contrast to the like 2,500, 3,000 that you usually do with Periphery, might seem small, but the vibe, like there's so much respect from the fans that the mood makes the show. But from a skill like I'm struggling with this one. So the reward of using my knowledge and using my skills is probably the biggest with Periphery, just because they are technically the hardest to mix. They've got the most going on. Wow, I butchered that one.
No. That's good to hear. They're one of my favorite bands. So it's nice to hear that they're consistently tight. I mean, did you find that there was a steep learning curve with working with them compared to, say, to Plini?
It was honestly the biggest thing with them was the extra guitar and putting the vocal back in, because I was so used to mixing where everything just can be as upfront as possible because there's no vocals to think about, and then all of a sudden you put Spencer in there, and obviously he is unbelievably important. Like he adds so much to the music. He's not just screaming for an hour. He's doing a lot of hooks, and a lot of the melody in the music is Spencer. So he has a very important place in the mix, but I just wasn't used to having the spill in the mics, because there's 3 live mics on there. There's Spencer, Mark, and Jake all have live mics on stage. So battling that was new. Well, it wasn't, I mean, not brand new, but I had almost forgotten what it was like to mix vocals. So that was a nice welcome challenge again.
Could you just explain a bit more why it's more of a challenge to have the 3 mics?
Well, because it's well, especially when I was getting used to the set, I was getting used to where Jake and Mark come into play, so I couldn't just mute them and then unmute them because I didn't know, I wasn't used to the set. So I just had 3 open mics that were just full of spill for the first probably few weeks. And you know, you can try different positioning and things like that to combat it, but eventually once I learned it, it was fine. But yeah, the spill, all of the cymbals just careening into the microphones from the back of the stage was a huge challenge.
And how do you find, I guess, so say acts like Car Bomb, where they're quite organic in comparison to say Periphery's kind of digital setup. Do you find things like that vary and affect you massively on the road between bands?
Yes, so it's very different because there's such a, they're like, when you see Car Bomb live, right? Especially Mike, bless him, he just looks like he kind of doesn't care. He's just dad dancing around and screaming, and then goes back to his dad dancing. It's very funny to watch, and they're an incredible band. But Mike also like mics all of the cymbals up when he's dad dancing, so he'll just be waving the mic back and forwards like he's at a wedding, and he's just grazing the china when he's doing it. But yeah, there's more discussion to be had there because the shows are smaller, and of course you want to have the best mix possible. So that includes a lot of conversation of like, all right, can we just turn the cabs down a bit? And the bass cab, especially Johnny, love him, but he likes it loud. Which is, yeah. So I mean, the thing, there's more discussion from a compromise standpoint with things like that, which I don't really have to do that with Periphery, because when you're playing rooms that big, like we did Kentish Town Forum the last time we were in Europe, you can kind of have your cabs pretty loud up there before it starts encroaching on front of house because of the sheer amount of distance between the stage and the crowd. Whereas you do like Car Bomb, that Euro tour, which got cut short, we did, I mean, a venue in Cologne, which was basically a floor show. So there's just a lot more discussion to be had to find that sort of middle ground of where it's like, okay, cool, the cab noise is sort of quiet enough to allow me to do my thing to make it more of an experience for everyone who's there.
Okay. And then I guess just looking at your, you mentioned you did a bit of teaching. How, what didn't you enjoy about the teaching, and what did you enjoy about it?
There was some pretty like horrible stuff happening from an office standpoint, which I mean, I don't want to call them out because most people who listen to this could probably assume where I taught. But let's just say some of the grades that I gave to some of the students were not reflected in the end of year grade reports, at which point I knew it was just a big cash grab from them, and it sort of didn't sit well because I think, especially as a new teacher, you put a lot of hard work into making sure people actually learn the things that they're supposed to learn. And then when the institution steps in and they're like, nah, we want the money, so we're going to upgrade that a little bit, I was kind of like, oh, all right. But there's also probably teachers who are going to listen to this who will know that you put in a lot more hours than you were paid for. Sorry. And eventually it just catches up with you. Like, I was on an hourly paid contract, and I was easily spending probably twice as many hours as I was being paid for, like sitting in the office, sort of planning lessons and things like that. And it just eventually caught up, and it just coincided with something not very fun that happened in my life that I kind of wanted to get away from. So I was like, right, I'm going to try this touring thing again, but I'm going to be the sound guy instead of the guitarist. And it worked out lovely.
Speaking of, how you were working at studio from quite a young age and then transitioning into sound engineering, obviously it's quite a technical skill to learn. So how was your balance between sort of formal training and learning on the job?
Well, I mean, so I started dabbling in the studio stuff and got my mentor when I was 14. I didn't go to college, well, obviously, until 16, well, 17. Got a quite early birthday. I'm a September boy, Virgo. So 17 was when I started getting, the academic side of it. But from a practical standpoint, it was straight off the bat, like, this is how you work the ADAT machine. There was no computer in there. It was like, you've got to get the good take, or at least what you consider to be a good take when you're 14, learning how to use a studio with no computer was incredibly rewarding. But yeah, I didn't start the formal academic side until I was 17. So I had three years of like a practical studio environment with no computer before I dove into the actual the book side of it, where you learn all your theory and room modes and things like that.
And do you think that experience is more important than the theory, or is it a sort of split? Just thinking of, people that are listening that are interested in getting into that, what would you advise is going to give them the biggest step up?
Absolutely, the experience. You can learn the theory while you're getting the experience. It's important to learn that theory, but you can't. There are things that you will just never understand about sound until you're actually in an environment where you have to work with it regularly, be it a studio or a venue. In my case, I mean, you can read as many live sound theory books as you want, but they're not going to be able to teach you how to deal with people on the road and learn to live with a new crew of people for 5 weeks, because you literally cannot explain that to someone, because everybody's experience is going to be totally different.
From your Instagram, it seems to be finding the best coffee every day.
Absolutely, that's a staple of everyone's day. I cannot stress that enough. But whatever it is, it doesn't have to be coffee. Just because I'm obsessed with coffee, it doesn't mean that that's the thing that you have to do when you're on the road. It could be anything. It could be just taking a walk to look at the churches. And there are a lot of people that like churches, the architecture especially. But like, you have to make time to do that stuff. You have to. Even if it's just like a 10-minute walk away from the venue and back, because that's all of the time that you have to do it, because if you're not doing things on the road to make you feel normal, you're going to have a tough time. Again, another thing it's quite hard to explain, and I learned that the hard way. Like, one of my friends, he tours full-time, like large-scale arena style touring, as a musician, and he gave me a warning. John Waff plays saxophone in the 1975. Hi, John, if you listen to this. He told me, like, you will sort of start losing your short-term memory, and you will, forget where you are, where you were, and it just starts blurring into one. And I was like, nah, no way. Like, green, wide-eyed. And then I was mixing Plini and intervals on the Animals as Leaders support. And about 4.5, 5 weeks in, it happened. And there's a sound guy somewhere in Italy, I think might have been Milan, nearby, who was like, oh, where were you yesterday? And I was like, and I had to get my tour pass out, figure out where I was at that moment in time, and then tell him where I was the day before. And then it hit us, and I was like, all right, yeah. And that was simply just because I was not doing enough to make that sort of lifestyle feel normal. I was quite complacent in just hanging out in the bus and then going into the venue. And it just, yeah. The reason I go and get the coffee all the time is because, yes, I'm obsessed with coffee, but also because you have to do things that make that really weird life. Like, let's face it, you live in a metal can with your mates, and you go to sleep in Berlin and you wake up and you're not in Berlin anymore. It's really bizarre, and it takes a while to get used to. So the little things that you can do to make it feel normal, you absolutely should do. So though you may mock me, Joe, there's a very good reason, and it's not just the subtle undertones of of the pour over.
Well, I need to say publicly that we're only teasing each other because we're friends. But
Yeah.
for people who are listening,
It's all love.
who who don't sort of understand what a day in the life of touring is like, do you want to sort of talk through what being on a big tour, like say the Animals as Leaders bus, is like for a couple of days, and how like you touched on little bits of how you cope, but what is the routine?
Well, it changes as the artists that you work for get a bit bigger. So, at the base level, which Joe, I've been on a few tours with you, like sprinter tours. I mean, I suppose base level is car level, touring in a car, but like when you're sort of traveling in a van, everybody chips in with the load in, the load out, or well, except for the vocalists mainly. But it does change when your role becomes more sort of set in stone when you're on a bus. There's usually more than one member of crew, so you'll wake up. If you're in the UK, your load in time is probably like half an hour before doors, because for some reason over here, unless you're playing in an arena, they think that like 2 hours is fine to just set up every single band and sound check all of them. So you have late load in, but like America in particular, the schedule is usually about 11. You'll crack the trailer, load everything in, set everything up. You've normally got about 3 hours to do that, which you don't always need. I know I did the Convergence tour with Animals and Periphery co-headlining in 2017, and would definitely needed the time for that because both bands had massive light rigs and we had this weird split drum riser setup. But you'll set up, you'll sound check. If you are me and you like punishing yourself, you work for 2 or 3 bands on a package, and so then you have to set up the next one. And then usually about 3:30, 4-ish, you'll be free, at which point you can, go and find a coffee shop or whatever if they're still open. And then, yeah, there's that just weird period, that weird downtime where it's like, okay, nothing's open, and I've been watching the opening band for the last 24 days and I just don't want to watch them. So you just have a few hours to just do. There's not really much you can do. I think that's the hardest part for me. Which is like, oh no, first world problems, obviously, but it can. That's easily the toughest part of the day, is that period of time where, all right, I'm finished with sound checks. The show's not for another 4 hours, but it's 4:30. By the time I walk anywhere, they're gonna be closing, so I won't really be able to say anything or do anything. So I might as well have a nap, or I might as well play games in the bus or whatever. So anyway, you do the show. Enough complaining. Do the show. If it's a headliner, it's probably about 11 when the band goes off, 10:30 in some places. And then it's pack down time. Depending on how much stuff you have, you might close the trailer door by midnight if you're lucky. And then rinse and repeat. So, I mean, you're still full of energy by the time you close the trailer door, so you're probably not getting to sleep until about 1 or 2, and then you're going to wake up at about probably 8 or 9. That's quite late for me, but 8 or 9 the next day, you've got time to have a coffee, and then you crack the trailer and do it all again.
What's it like sleeping on a bus for a month?
Honestly, sick, really sick. I like it. I really, really like that little coffin, and I miss it when I'm home. You get used to it. It was weird at first. Like you sort of, because it is a bit like a coffin. In a lot of buses, they don't have windows, so you close that curtain, and unless some absolute knob has left the bunk alley lights on, it's pitch black. And it's really weird at first, but once you get used to the noise, and it's a lot of noise. You don't realize how much noise it is until you just turn it off. It's one of them. You get used to it, but the vibrating and the moving, it kind of just rocks you to sleep. I like it.
Yeah, you've talked to me before about sometimes when you get back from tour, because you're so used to the routine, that it being a bit weird being in sort of a domestic setting.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I was really. I think I just sort of had the blinders on, and I was just seeing tour through rose tinted glasses, because, I mean, my sort of like rise, and I'm putting that in air quotes. You can't see it, but I am. My rise was pretty quick. Like, I mean, I'm only coming up to, I'm 5 years in. I should probably still be working in, a 200-300 cab venue as an in-house guy, but I was so just determined to be on the road and only work for bands that I liked. And I just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed that it was really quick. So I'm still now seeing it through rose tinted glasses. But what I was completely neglecting was that, like, having that really regimented schedule, and then coming home to maybe no plans at all, can be hugely damaging. And last year, I did suffer a little bit with the post-tour depression, which a lot of people have started talking about more, and it needs to be talked about more, because I think there are people out there where they're like, oh, what's wrong? You're like, well, it's really hard to come home from the road. And they're like, oh God, yeah, your life's so hard. You get to travel around for work and see the world and get paid. And like, oh no, you just got back from Japan. Oh, wow. Like, but it goes much deeper than that, in that, well, every single day that I've been away, I've had to just look at the sheet of paper on the wall, and I'm like, okay, that's my life. Like, this is the regimented time schedule that I have to stick to. And then you come home and you step through the door and you lock it behind you. And then all of a sudden you realize, like, wow, my house is silent. I've now got no one to talk to. I've got no schedule, nowhere to be, nothing to do. And eventually that will absolutely catch up with you. And so now I'm, trying to be more proactive I was, until the current situation, trying to be more proactive with, like leaving the house and making plans and hanging out with people that I don't get to hang out with because I'm not here. But yeah, the adjustment coming home really is quite a tough one. And some people don't suffer from it, and that's fine. And I haven't suffered from it in a little while, just because I've been mindful about it. But it can get you. I know, yeah, Joe, I definitely spoke to you about it. I think it was around Radar time when I was telling you how burnt out I felt. Because yeah, it must have been then, right? I don't think
it was around then, yeah, because you were just coming towards the end of a really long stint, and you had a month home, and you didn't quite know what you were going to do with yourself.
Yeah, but I had purposely taken that month off. Yeah, I remember that now, because I cancelled two little tours in September, because I sort of realized exactly how I was feeling. But yeah, I mean, so last year I did. Right. So hang on. Let us think about this. I did India with Tesseract, and then I think I had a week or two off, and I did Asia and India with Plini, and also went through a breakup, and then I had a couple of weeks, and then I did America with Plini, and then I had a couple of weeks, and then did, I want to say, was it Europe with Plini? Hang on. Maybe I've got this in a calendar. That would have been helpful. Maybe I don't, though. Let's have a look. 2019. No, disorganized as ever. But basically, right, look, by August, I had been to America, and I had also been to Asia twice, and Asia once, India twice, Europe a bunch of times. And I think between January and August, which is when I saw you, I had probably 5 weeks, maybe 6 total off the road. And it's like, I mean, it sounds like a lot. Everyone's like, oh, 5 weeks holiday. Oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, but mentally, you have to decompress from the road and get used to not having anything to do. And then once you get sort of relaxed with being home and you start feeling like, oh, make some plans, we'll do something today. Then it's like, oh, shit, I've got to be at the airport at 7 a.m. because I've got to go to Australia or whatever, where you're going, you know what I mean? But it will catch up with you, and if you don't, if you're not mindful of spending your time wisely when you're at home, which I was not at all. I was like, oh, fuck yeah, I've got nothing to do. And I would go to the gym and then come back and just sit on the Xbox all day and play Rocket League, which is fine because Rocket League's the best game of all time. But if you just do that over and over and over and over again, and you don't really seek out that like human contact and talking to your friends and stuff, then it will absolutely catch up with you and bite you in the arse, which is what it did with me. So yeah, by Radar, and after Radar, I'm pretty sure we still had to go to Russia or Greece, one or the other. Because I know there was a long fly show at the end of that run. I can't remember where it was, but yeah, telling you in August that I was burnt out. That was the first time that I had admitted to anyone that I was like, okay, I'm really not okay. And it's what a horrible segue from talking about how great tour is to talking about how horrible tour
I
is.
think it's a more realistic viewpoint of how you have to balance everything. I mean, I've not toured for as long as you have at all, but even after working festivals, I was steward manager at a festival with Joe, and I remember getting back and sitting down for the first time on my own for 6 or 7 days, just deciding that I was hungry and looking for a food voucher to go to my own fridge, because you're just indoctrinated in the method of, okay, well, if I want to eat, I need to hand someone a voucher so that I can get that meal, and it's adjusting your mindset. So how do you think that has helped or hindered your preparation for lockdown? I'm assuming that you sort of went into 10 weeks of isolation with some preparation, even if you didn't intend to.
I did actually. So just to touch on what you said there, you can never it doesn't happen in the same time frame for everyone, because it might never happen as long as you're mindful about trying to find a balance. Like, there's a balance to be struck, and that is scheduling things while you're home, and it obviously not load in, load out, like none of that stuff, but just making sure that like you make plans in advance with people, or plans to do anything in advance and stick to it and stuff, so that when you go on the road it's not alien, and when you come home it's not alien. And also, while you're on the road, do things that are normal when you can, like go and get a coffee, go and have a walk around away from the venue, go and grab food that's not sliced meat, sliced cheese, and soggy salad. And there's definitely a balance to be found there, and I feel like I have finally found that balance. So when I went on the car bomber and that got cut short, because we're hearing all of the news, I had a feeling that some stuff was going to get cancelled. So I just penciled a few things in, managed to finish my album, I've mixed. I mixed an EP for The Devil Wears Prada. I mixed a single for Periphery, and I've mixed 5 tracks for another band, which is another live release. And then I'm currently mixing an album for another band, which is a live release. So whilst that work was extra, I had sort of in my mind, like, okay, I'm going to have some time to like chill out, but I also need to be proactive. So I had planned a little bit to try and get some work into the studio. So yeah, preparation was key. I think a lot of people have got it a lot worse than me though, and I've been trying to reach out to people in the lockdown just to see how they're doing and stuff. Because it's tough. It's really tough to go from without thinking about the money side of things, I've lost out on six tours so far have been cancelled that I was supposed to be on. And you just have to, you have to try and deal with it. You can't really be fully prepared for it, but at least at the start, I was like, okay, I'm going to have time to do this, and I'm going to have time to do this thing as well. And I did those things. So now is the time where I'm just trying not to panic. What about thing... actually? That is so. Hang on, if I want to flip the question here, because you started the podcast and stuff, but what else have you guys been doing to combat? Like, we don't have an industry to work in currently in terms of live music and events. So what have you guys been doing instead?
It's really weird because everything I do is related to shows. So I have actually, I got myself into a bit of a rut at one point, and I kind of realised that I was treating it like school holidays. It's like you said, playing loads of PlayStation. I don't have a PlayStation, I've got a PC, but just wasting my time a bit. And I actually had to say to some of the guys we do stuff regularly with that I need to set Monday to Friday work hours, and that's what's really got me through. Whether I'm working on Radar with Catherine and Ash here, or trying to do some promoting. Or
did you just say Cash?
Yeah, I did. I misspoke.
Nice. That's
combined their names. Yeah,
no, that's pretty good. You could have a joint Facebook page. Like
I think we should do that.
Subliminals.
Like when people's parents have joint Facebook accounts, and it's like Trevor, and then the middle name is and Mary, and then the surname. You guys could just be Cash,
like Brangelina.
Cash.
Yeah. Yeah, we're often compared to Brangelina.
The other thing, Ash and I have started a side business where we are doing sort of social media growth and marketing for everyone from bands to one of our clients is a pizza restaurant, and sort of thrown in that is a bit of artist management. Basically what he and I do. Catherine didn't want to be part of it because she was too cool. But,
I don't think that's accurate.
What have you guys been doing?
I would dispute that.
I didn't know that, Joe. You haven't messaged us 400,000 times asking if I want to hire you to do my social media for my new band. So
that's
congratulations
misleading.
on your new business that I did not know about.
We're talking for other people to listen, aren't we? And you asked the question.
I'm
so,
talking about
what have you been doing, Catherine?
I mean, mine's not quite as cheerful in that I run 2 other businesses aside from Radar. So the first month of lockdown was essentially the admin of cancelling my own income, which wasn't that much fun. Every single element of my work is in events, similar to the rest of us. So that was not. I certainly felt like I was keeping busy, but not in a wholesome manner. and now a lot of my day is, as you were saying, Ronnie, just trying to make sure that there's a routine. Just making sure that every day I have something to focus on that is work related in some manner. I don't think I've had this amount of time without defined work in my adult life, and I find it difficult not to be a workaholic. So in some ways, just even if it's silly little projects to keep me occupied, making sure that I have that so that I don't go insane slowly is something that I've tried to be mindful of. But the government guidelines for opening music venues are so complicated and so all-consuming that has kept me busy for the last couple of weeks. I'll give them that.
I am curious as to how far along it's coming. I did see a news article earlier where they're talking about doing drive-in shows. Like there've been Mark Rebier. You know who Mark Rebier is?
No.
I know the name. I read the article.
He's the Loop Daddy. He is honestly the best person to ever grace the internet, and I love him. And if he wants to hire me to be a sound guy, I will do it.
Sorry. I'm so dyslexic that I got the surname wrong. We actually tried to book him for the after party at Radar last year.
Oh God. That honestly, if you can book him for an after party, I don't care how much money he wants. I'll chip in. I will chip in. I have to see it. He's so funny. He is so funny. But he, I think, is the first tour that was back on the road, and he was doing drive-in, like where all the drive-in movie theaters. Instead, they just set a stage up where the cinema screen was, and plumb him into the speakers, and people just drove up and got to see him play live.
Amazing.
I can't see how that would work for us because we don't have any. So,
no, I mean,
are there any drive-in movie theaters? I don't think I've ever seen one.
I saw someone saying that if they were to do it at the National Bowl, which is like 60,000 people, it could fit something like 500 cars. So 500 times 4 people. It's a bit of a capacity decrease. I mean, we all know people that run music venues, and I think it's been getting quite bleak in the last week because people are really starting to get to the point where the money is biting and the government are not helping. We shared something on our socials today. This is being recorded on the 19th, where the Music Venues Trust are trying to put a bit of pressure on the government to just invest a bit of money to support the venues because, in the grand scheme of things for the government, 50 million, which can save nearly 1 billion sector, seems like small change. But I know that everyone's finding it a bit difficult dealing with the government because, for one reason or another, things are not run by local authorities anymore. They get outsourced to, I think it's a accountancy firm that's dealing with the music sector. So, yeah, it's difficult. I think, everyone's looking at next year. I was actually going to ask you in a follow-up, without obviously giving away any tour plans, what you've heard about plans for next year.
I have got things in my calendar for next year, and not a lot of it is in the UK. That's what I will say so far. There's a lot of mainland Europe and a lot of America and a little bit of Asia so far, and that all starts in March, according to what I can see right now. But yeah, not a lot in the UK. Funny that they found $1 million to paint a plane, though, right? Painting, that's important.
To be fair to him, it was a pretty horrible shade of grey.
Which seems ideal,
I
currently.
I can't imagine there are a lot of things in his life that aren't grey. Like, his personality is so colourful that it just feel like he absorbs all of the colour from the world around him, and everything is grey. But this is not about politics, and whatever your political leanings are, has nothing to do with me. Real quick though, right? Ash never answered the question of what he's been up to.
Well, I didn't really want to share because it hasn't been particularly positive, but I obviously have been helping and working with Joe a little bit. He's been doing most of the work. I'll be honest with you, as I've been tending to some family matters. But I have written some music that I hope to release with a new project next year.
Nice.
That's about it, actually. But I actually had a couple of questions in regards to more kind of technical side of things, because there will be followers that are into their gear. So I'm curious as to what gear you tour with, and what's your preferred gear in some of your venues, and how I guess the quality of gear differs in country or region.
Are we talking about my personal gear or the artist's gear? Happy to talk about either, if I haven't lost them all already with my nervous sensors from near the start.
Well, I mean, what what do you use? What do you prefer using if you can't use what you usually use? I mean, I've worked with some sound guys that bring their own desks, but I know some bands provide, have got their own desks as well, and obviously some venues don't allow you to install your own desk. So I guess there's a couple of different questions there, but keen to know, what works for you, and what you like, and what surprised you.
So I usually tour with an M32 or an X32, which has a horrible reputation because Behringer, but it's, for the price point, the best console on the market, in my opinion at least. And it's so cheap that we've basically bought two. One lives in America and one lives in Europe. And then when we're in Asia, we just request an X32 or an M32. And that's mainly just because the guys have the X32 rack for the ears. So it makes sense to just be able to Cat 5, and then they've got their ear mix done. I know exactly how things are coming in and how it's going to sound. And I don't have to spend any time on the fly trying to learn a new console, which is always fun. Don't get me wrong, that's a really recent thing that I've started touring with my own console. And I do like learning other consoles. I think it's essential to do so. If I had the option, I would tour with probably a Digico SD9. That's what is installed in a venue that I do work in at home sometimes. So yeah, if I had the option, it'd be Digico SD9. But for, first of all, price, and second of all, ease, we being Plini, Animals, and Car Bomb, and Periphery as well, just request M32 or X32 if we're not traveling with one already. And I have in my Pelican a selection of mics that I like. If you want me to get into those, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, do it.
All right, so Beta 91A for the kick in, and a D6 for kick out. And then I've got Beta 57 for snare top, and regular SM57 for snare bottom. And then I have Sennheiser E614s that I use on hats and overheads and rides and things like that. And I've got E604s for the toms. I also, not that I have to bring them out very often, but I have some Sennheiser E906 mics for guitar cabs, which I also use. Interestingly, little trick, well, not necessarily a trick, but tip, the rejection on the 906 is so good that I use it as a spot mic on stack cymbals.
Okay.
And it literally, it doesn't pick any of the drum kit up at all, other than the stack. I mean, it does, obviously, but it's so quiet that it's, you just stick it under a stack real close, like you were micing a guitar cab, and it's perfect.
How many bands do you work with that use stacks?
Oh, who isn't using the stack now?
Oh, really? Is it?
I mean, Gostga was the first one, and I was using I was using one of the 614s, and the spill was insane because, of course, it's really close usually to the rest of the drum kit. So getting a condenser in that close, it's spill city. And then I was just like, I've brought these guitar mics. I don't need them because all of the guitars are DI'd. So I'm gonna just chuck one up there and see what it sounds like, and it was absolutely perfect. I've also used it on in like an auxiliary snare, but in terms of stacks, yeah, Animals have got stack. Periphery have got a stack. Plini's drummer Chris Allison, he uses a stack. Although I don't spot mic his because it's in a position that allows the overheads to pick it up properly. Man, who else has got stacks? Straight from the Path. I'm pretty sure Craig's got a stack.
I didn't realise it got that popular.
Has he got a stack? Ah, no, I don't. No, I don't think he does. I think I'm bullshitting. I think I am lying. He's got a big old loud China though. Yeah, no, like because the thing with the stacks is like they sound loud, but as soon as you put a different symbol like between the mic and the stack, you just can't hear it. So you have to get a spot in there. So if you have any dynamic mics, but in particular if you have a 906, just stick it underneath the stack and you're sorted.
Noted. I guess so. Everything that you've learnt from touring and being on the road and the live sound kind of stuff, does that translate into your new studio project that you've started? And can you tell us a little bit about the band that you've just gone live with?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Of course, there are techniques that you would use in the studio that you just couldn't use live, but certainly, working with sound every single day has just informed my knowledge of sound. So now I do things way differently in the studio than I would have 5 years ago, for example. In terms of, I know you're asking about the studio project that I'm doing. Musically, it hasn't really been informed by the bands that I work with, just because I'm not instrumentally gifted enough to do the kinds of things that they do. My project is a noisy metalcore project for fans of like Silent Planet, Norma Jean, Architects, bands like that, and it's in their most basic forms, and definitely nothing like Animals as Leaders or any of the instrumentally capable bands that I work for. But yeah, working with sound every day has absolutely just made my studio work way more informed. But obviously the crucial difference is live, I don't get to just like pause it and go back, where in the studio it's more focused and you can spend a long time making sure you get it right. Whereas if you get it wrong live, it sucks in the moment. It's a horrible feeling. Like, shit, I forgot to unmute that, or oh man, that sounds terrible, and you have to like fix an EQ or something. It lasts, maybe a couple of minutes. Or best case scenario, it's there and it's gone in like a second. So the feeling is horrible when it happens. However, it just goes away. Whereas if something's really wrong in the studio, it's gonna be there and you have to fix it. So the biggest difference between the two is just the amount of time that you can spend on the studio side of things. But yeah, they both inform each other. It's just that I have to be a lot faster live, which has made me a lot faster in the studio. However, I do like having the luxury of just like, all right, I'm going to save this project for now and come back to it. I can't do that with the show, unfortunately, as much as I would like to sometimes.
So, looking to the future, when things are hopefully back to normal and you'll be going out touring, are you hoping to sandwich some tours in with your new project where you're playing as opposed to being the engineer?
Yes, definitely yes. I can say that even though we're a two-man band currently, I will be putting a band together and we will be playing shows. Yes.
Applications on a postcard.
Look, I mean, hey, listen, if you can play like some Limp Bizkit riffs, just hit me up, and yeah, sorted. But I mean, so it's been playing on my mind for a little bit. It's like I didn't miss being in a band at all, and then you just I started getting the itch again, where once you like settle in with a band, the mix becomes a lot easier. And I found myself sort of daydreaming a few times. I was like, oh, I wish I was on the other side of the barrier because the vibe's so good. Like if you have a really good show and everyone's like jumping around and singing along, even with the instrumental bands that sing along, which is bizarre, but okay. You just sort of get that energy and you're kind of like, yeah, I wish I was playing in front of this crowd instead of standing here making it sound good or whatever. Like, so I was kind of like, okay, all right, it's time to just pick a guitar up and see what happens.
Maybe I know the
yeah.
answer to this already, but what show would you say gave you the biggest? You're obviously in the moment mixing, but I know you sometimes step away and just be like, this is an amazing moment. Which is the shows that really stand out?
Animals as leaders at Coco. That was crazy. That was actually the first time I'd ever been to Coco, and I did not know how tall it was, and I also didn't know I was going to be mixing on a balcony.
Such an amazing venue.
It's so sick. What has been happening with that? Because didn't the roof catch fire or something? I'm sure the roof caught fire recently, right? So is it getting fixed or what?
I think it's being renovated, and then Corona hit. So I'm not sure what the status.
I think it was they found asbestos, so they had to do work on it, and then
that's good.
Then there was a fire, and then obviously everything's been shut down anyway.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Coco comes back. But yeah, Animals as Leaders of Coco was probably the first time that I can really pinpoint just going like, this is actually crazy. This is actually a crazy show. Because obviously the instrumental bands, they put on amazing shows, but it's not really mosh pit music. Do you know what I mean? So even though the vibe's good and everyone's all like happy and, they get loud and they sing along with some of the guitar lines and everyone's really friendly. Yeah. Physical education at Coco, if you can find a video of it, was the first time I had heard a full, like, 1,000 and some odd people singing along with Javier's lead line and jumping up and down. And it was like a full-on party to this, like, obscure 3-piece instrumental prog band. And I never thought I would see it. But that was the first time I can pinpoint. I mean, there were probably times earlier than that, but that's the one that sticks out the most in my memory. That was the first time where I was like, okay, I really miss playing shows because I bet they feel way better than I feel currently, and I feel really good. So that's like, that was the first time in memory. And then there were plenty of shows after that where, because I already had the itch, so I feel like I was just like subconsciously looking for those moments. But that was when I first was like, okay, time to just like, even just write an album just for me. And then, Chris jumped on board again. I used to be in a band with Chris back in the day. And together we have created a moody, noisy album that I'm very proud of and I really like, even if no one else likes it. Like, I mean, I'm going to be sad if no one else likes it, but I like it, and that's sort of the main thing, I suppose.
And when's that being released?
September for the full album. No solid dates yet, but the first single comes out next Friday, and it's actually available to pre-save today. So I need to do a post when we finish up with this chat. But it feels really weird to talk about being in a band again. I'm used to just like talking about being in the crew, so this conversation is kind of bizarre to me. I like it, don't get us wrong, but I don't think I was prepared to talk about it.
It sounds like the sort of music that a lot of people are going to appreciate after 10 weeks in, or more in lockdown anyway. They probably want some method of getting their anger out.
Yeah. Just, don't expect anything flashy on the guitar and you'll probably like it.
In terms of discussing sort of other people's music as well, what sort of music have you been listening to whilst in lockdown yourself?
I have been listening to a lot of Silent Planet because they released the instrumental versions of all of their albums. I'm always really intrigued about the instrumental versions because there's always things that you hear that you couldn't hear before because the vocals were there and like all of the vocal effects were drowning out little synth parts and stuff. So I've had that playlist on repeat and the new Acacia Strain. I don't know if you guys have heard the new Acacia Strain, but it's crazy.
Didn't they release like a string of EPs or something in a?
Yeah, so they did like 5 singles that were 2 tracks each that make the album up. So there are playlists now with the album in full, and it's just spectacular. I love it. I haven't really vibed with an Acacia Strain album in a long time.
Let me guess, since Wormwood.
Actually, hang on. What was the album called with Angry Mob Justice? Whoa, Shut It Down. That was like 2006 or 2007.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, and but only because I feel like I was ignorant. Like if I listen to the albums that they've released since then now, I'm kind of like, this slaps actually. Let me just check on the name of that album for people at home, and it is truly a 2006 banger. It sounds like the year 2006, and it was called The Dead Walk.
Yes, I remember. Yeah.
The Dead Walk. Such a horribly angry album, and that came out at the same time as Goodbye to the Gallows, Emmure. And that was like all that early like deathcore stuff.
Yeah.
And then I just didn't. I don't know. I wasn't really fussed after that about deathcore. I wasn't really bothered about it. But now when I listen to all those albums, I'm like, shit, I missed out. I probably should have been listening to this. But yeah, new Acacia Strain is one of the darkest records I've heard in a long time.
Noted. I might get on that.
It's more musical. It's way more musical than what I'm used to hearing from the Acacia Strain.
Yeah.
Because they put an EP out before Christmas or like near Christmas, and it was just straight up like blackened like death metal style, sludgy kind of. Actually, probably not death metal. I guess death metal would be faster, but it was really like grimy, sludgy, dirty, methodical, angry music, which they've never done before. Really drony. And yeah, they've just put this album out that's weirdly in between that like deathcore stuff that they do and the sludgy, drony stuff that they put out, and it's just magical. It's great. I love it. I'm a lover of really horrible sounds, and I think that's probably why Iowa is my favorite metal album of all time.
Do you have a preference in regards to the types of bands that you mix? So do you prefer mixing heavy stuff like deathcore, or do you prefer kind of more lighter, not necessarily from a challenge aspect, but from hearing it night after night?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean, but unfortunately, I don't really have an answer that's going to satisfy you because it's a completely different vibe. Like the Car Bomb shows are nuts because it's just heavy, really, really, really heavy, and like I mix Osaya as well. Some people in the community will be familiar with Osaya. I've mixed Osaya a lot, and that's a completely different vibe to mixing a Plini show. But there's so much enjoyment that comes from a Plini show that I don't really get from the heavier side of things. So I don't really prefer one or the other. I prefer the bigger shows, definitely, because it allows me to do my thing more. Because the systems are bigger and have more headroom, and the rooms are nicer, and all of that sort of stuff. So I can like really sort of flex my mix muscles, and do my job better in those bigger rooms. But definitely those two, I enjoy both vibes. I don't prefer one or the other, I don't think.
Well, we just crossed over the hour, so I think that's a natural point to wrap up. Ronnie, thank you very much for.
I do waffle
No,
on
it's good.
there,
It was really informative, so thank you very much for dropping by. So
Yeah,
goodbye
thanks for
from
having
Ronnie.
us. Yeah, bye. Probably see you next year at Radar.
Hopefully. Goodbye from Ash.
Goodbye. Thanks very much.
And bye from Catherine.
Goodbye. Thanks, Ronnie.
Cool. Take care. Stay safe.